I stood outside the Westfield Corporate Center as twilight faded over Chicago. The building stood tall 20 stories high against the darkening sky, all glass and concrete in that boxy late 70s style that architects must have thought looked futuristic at the time. Now it just looked old. My new security uniform still felt stiff against my skin. The company patch on my shoulder caught on the car door as I grabbed my lunch bag. I'd packed sandwiches, chips, and enough coffee in my thermos to keep me alert through my first night shift. My resume had landed me this job within days. Apparently, they needed someone fast. The lobby doors slid open with a mechanical whine as I approached. I checked my watch. 10:30 p.m. I was half an hour early, but first impressions matter. The cavernous lobby swallowed the sound of my footsteps. A security desk sat near the elevators, where a heavy-set man in a uniform matching mine looked up from his phone. "You must be Wilson." He tucked his phone away and stood up. "Thomas Rodriguez. Everyone calls me Tom." He reached out to shake my hand. His palm felt clammy, and I noticed the slight tremble in his fingers. "Michael," I said. "But Mike is fine." Tom nodded and checked his watch. "Let me get you set up before I head out." He showed me the basics: how to work the elevator key, where the breaker panels were, which tenants might work late. All standard stuff that I'd done at previous security jobs. But Tom was acting weird. He kept looking at the clock, his explanations short and rushed. "This is your station," Tom said as he unlocked a small room behind the main desk. Inside sat a desk with several monitor displays, a computer, phones, and cabinets filled with keys and paperwork. "You'll be the only one here at night. Building closes to regular employees at 8 p.m. He pulled an envelope from his pocket and placed it on the desk. "Your keys and access cards are in here, along with some standard procedures." I opened the envelope and found a small ring of keys, an electronic pass card, and a typed list labeled "Security Protocols, Night Shift." 6 numbered rules filled the page. "Just standard procedure," Tom said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Follow these exactly." I looked over the list quickly. 1. Never answer any phone calls between 11:30 p.m. and 5 a.m. 2. Avoid looking directly at any unusual figures on the security cameras. 3. If the temperature drops suddenly, turn off all lights and remain motionless. 4. Do not open the main doors for anyone after midnight, regardless of who they appear to be. 5. Stay in the supply closet from 3:33 a.m. to 3:57 a.m. every night. 6. Leave the building at exactly 5 a.m., no earlier and no later. "These seem oddly specific," I said, looking up at Tom. He busied himself with the security monitors, turning them on one by one. "Company policy. The owner's a bit eccentric." His casual tone seemed fake. "Now let me show you the camera system." Tom pointed out each monitor, showing me the feed from different floors. Camera 1 is the main entrance. 2 covers the parking garage. 3 through 8 are the main hallways. 9 through 15 cover the stairwells and elevator banks. His finger tapped nervously on the desk as he went through them. "What about emergency exits?" I asked. Tom showed me a map of the building on the wall, tracing exit routes with his finger. "Fire exits here, here, and here, but don't use them unless absolutely necessary. They trigger an alarm at the monitoring station downtown." I nodded, taking mental notes. "The previous night guard, Jacob, right? Did he leave any specific instructions I should know about?" Tom's hand froze mid-gesture. He looked away, suddenly very interested in straightening papers on the desk. "Family emergency. Had to quit without notice." "That's too bad," I said. "Hope everything's okay with his family." "Yeah," Tom mumbled, still not meeting my eyes. He grabbed a logbook from the shelf and placed it on the desk, clearly changing the subject. "You'll need to log any incidents, regular checks every hour." As he explained the routine, I noticed his hands shaking more obviously. He looked worn out, with dark circles under his eyes and an unhealthy color to his skin that made me wonder if he was sick. "One more thing," Tom said, his voice dropping slightly. He pointed to Rule 6 on my list. This is important. You leave at exactly 5 a.m., not 4:59, not 5:01. Exactly 5 a.m. The intensity in his voice caught me off guard. Okay. Any particular reason? That's when your relief arrives. Building policy. The explanation came too quickly. Tom looked at his watch again. I've got to go. Call the main office if you have any problems. Number's on the desk. He grabbed his stuff in a hurry. Thanks for the rundown, I said. I'm sure I'll be fine. Tom stopped at the door, looking back at me with a look I couldn't figure out. Just follow the rules, Wilson. All of them. Before I could say anything, he left, his footsteps getting quieter down the hall. Alone in the security office, I sat down and checked the rules again. They seemed weird, more like superstitions than actual security stuff. Rule 5 was really odd, hiding in a closet for exactly 24 minutes. I figured it was some kind of joke they played on new guards. I grabbed a flashlight from the desk drawer and decided to check out the building. The hallways were long and empty, my footsteps bouncing off the marble floors. Each floor looked different. Law firms with wood-paneled walls, tech startups with open spaces, financial companies with rows of empty cubicles. But they all had the same weird quiet of places meant for people that now sat empty. The building was cold, even though it was summer, and I zipped up my jacket as I walked. Everything looked old. Drop ceilings with fluorescent lights, dark windows that showed my reflection, walls painted colors that probably looked good back in the 80s. By the time I finished my walkthrough, it was nearly 11 p.m. I went back to the security office and opened the logbook Tom had shown me. Looking through the recent entries, I found Jacob's notes from the past month. The early ones were neat and normal, all clear on floors 1 to 20. Maintenance replaced light in stairwell B. Printer paper delivered to 14th floor. But as I turned the pages, I noticed the handwriting getting messier. The final week's entries were sloppy, with heavy pen marks. 2:15 a.m. Noises in the walls again, third night in a row. Temp dropped on 12th floor. No explanation. HVAC normal. Time seems wrong after midnight. Clock in West Hallway runs backward. The final entry, dated just 3 days ago, was barely legible. They're in the walls. Don't look at them. I closed the book and felt really uneasy. This had to be some joke on the new guy. Guards get bored during night shifts. I'd worked enough of them to know how your mind starts to wander. I turned on the computer to check my email and noticed a coffee cup sitting on the edge of the desk. I picked it up and was surprised it was still warm. The coffee was half finished. Someone must have been here recently. Maybe Tom had a cup before I got here and forgot to throw it out. But he told me Jacob quit 3 days ago. The phone on the desk rang suddenly, making me jump. A quick look at the clock showed 11:25 p.m. I picked up the receiver. Security. A mechanical voice responded. Automated phone system test in progress. All lines operational. The line went dead. I put the receiver back and leaned back in the chair. I'd heard that old buildings like this one run automated tests at certain times. I took out my sandwiches and thermos, getting ready for what would probably be a boring night. The monitor screens showed nothing but empty hallways and offices. Outside, Chicago was still busy even at night, but in here, everything felt weirdly quiet. I looked at the list of rules on the desk again. Rule 1 said not to answer phones between 11:30 p.m. and 5 a.m. That automated test had come in right before that cutoff. As I drank my coffee, I kept thinking something felt weird about this place. My hot coffee, the crazy stuff Jacob wrote in the logs, how nervous Tom acted, these strange rules. It all seemed fishy, but I couldn't figure out why. But I don't buy into ghost stories or urban legends. Buildings are just buildings. Old ones make weird noises when they settle. Air conditioning systems make the temperature change, and bored security guards write creepy stuff in logs to mess with whoever works after them. I opened the logbook again and wrote my first entry. 10:30 p.m. Michael Wilson on duty. Building secure. All systems normal. The clock on the wall hit 11:25 p.m. Around the building, phones started ringing in empty offices as the system did its nightly test. I leaned back in my chair, waiting for them to stop. I had no idea that in 5 minutes, I'd find out why that first rule was so important. The phone on the desk rang, its shrill tone cutting through the silence of the security office. I looked up from the logbook, a bit startled. The wall clock read exactly 11:30 p.m. I reached for the receiver automatically, my mind still stuck on Jacob's strange final entries. It wasn't until my hand closed around the plastic that I remembered the first rule on the list Tom had given me. Never answer any phone calls between 11:30 p.m. and 5 a.m. Too late. The receiver was already at my ear. "Security," I said. At first there was nothing but static, a soft hiss that made me think the line had disconnected. Then came the voice, if you could call it that. It started as a whisper that seemed to skip my ears and go straight into my brain. The sound twisted and changed, going up and down in pitch like nothing I'd ever heard. Words formed in the static, but they weren't English or any language I knew. Pain hit behind my eyes. My stomach tied itself in knots like I'd eaten something bad. The voice got louder, the whispers growing until it sounded like dozens of mouths speaking together, their words scratching against my thoughts like nails on a chalkboard. I slammed the phone down, my hands shaking so much I almost missed the cradle. The sound stopped, but an echo of it stayed in my head, a faint buzz that wouldn't go away. What the hell was that? I said to the empty room. The air around me got suddenly colder. I rubbed my arms, feeling goosebumps. The temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees in seconds. I looked at the thermostat on the wall. It still read 72 degrees, same as earlier. I took several deep breaths, trying to calm down. It was just a prank call, I told myself. Some bored employee working late decided to mess with the new guy. The cold was probably just a draft or the AC turning on. 15 minutes later, I had almost convinced myself it was nothing. I'd made a fresh cup of coffee and was checking each monitor one by one, writing notes in the logbook. Then I saw it. Movement on camera 3 caught my eye. The feed showed the main entrance of the building, the glass doors that led out to the street. Standing just outside was a tall figure in a long black coat. The coat reached nearly to the ground, completely still even though I knew the October wind was blowing outside. I couldn't see the figure's face. It was turned slightly away from the camera, but I knew for sure it was looking right at the lens, looking at me. I checked the other cameras. All clear. No one else could be seen in or around the building. I looked back at camera 3. The figure hadn't moved, not even an inch. It stood perfectly still, like a photograph instead of a live feed. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I couldn't look away, even as sweat formed on my forehead while the room stayed cold. Finally, after what felt like hours, the figure moved. One arm raised slowly toward the door, reaching with really long fingers toward the handle. Rule 2 popped into my head. Avoid looking directly at any unusual figures on the security cameras. I looked away from the monitor, my heart racing. I needed to move, to do something other than sit there staring at whatever that was. I grabbed my flashlight and left the security office, making sure to lock the door behind me. The corridor was empty, with yellowish light from the ceiling on the worn carpet. My footsteps sounded too loud in the quiet. The break room was on the same floor, just past the elevator bank. I headed there, telling myself I just needed more coffee, though what I really wanted was to be somewhere without monitors showing what might be waiting outside. The break room was small, but clean, with a kitchenette along one wall and a round table with chairs in the center. I turned on the lights and went straight for the coffee maker. As the machine started brewing, I leaned against the counter, trying to clear my head. That's when I noticed the bulletin board on the opposite wall. Most of it had the usual office notices. Fire evacuation procedures, HR announcements, a faded cartoon about washing your hands. But in the bottom corner, partly hidden behind a takeout menu, were several yellowed newspaper clippings. I crossed the room and carefully moved the menu aside. The top clipping was dated November 2nd, 1978. The headline read, "7 Dead in Westfield Center Accident." Below it was a grainy photo of the building, looking much the same as it did now, except newer. Police and ambulances crowded the entrance. I read through the article quickly. Apparently, 7 maintenance workers had been found dead in the building's lowest level. The official cause was listed as an equipment malfunction resulting in toxic gas exposure. But the article noted that the bodies showed unusual trauma inconsistent with asphyxiation. The piece ended with a quote from the building's then-owner claiming that safety measures would be improved. A smaller clipping beneath it, dated 2 weeks later, mentioned that the investigation had been closed with no further explanation. The final clipping, from 6 months after the incident, noted that the building had been sold to a new owner. The coffee maker beeped, pulling me from my reading. I poured a cup with shaky hands, my mind racing to connect what I was learning. The building had a history, a bad one, but old buildings often did. It didn't mean anything supernatural was happening. Gas leaks could cause hallucinations. Maybe Jacob had been affected by something similar. I looked at my watch, 12:35 a.m. I'd been away from the security desk longer than I'd planned. I took one last look at the clippings, trying to remember the details, then headed back toward the office. The corridor seemed darker on the way back, the shadows between light fixtures deeper than before. I walked faster, the coffee sloshing in my cup. When I reached the security office, I unlocked the door with shaky fingers and stepped inside. My eyes immediately went to the wall of monitors. Static filled every screen except camera 3. The snow-like interference covered the displays, making it impossible to see anything in the building. Only camera 3 stayed clear, showing the main entrance. The door now stood slightly open. I nearly dropped my coffee. I'd been at the desk when that door had last been checked, locked and secure. Now something had opened it. Something that had been standing outside just minutes earlier. I put the coffee down and grabbed the phone, planning to call the police. My finger stopped over the keypad as I remembered the voice from before. But this was different. This was an emergency. Before I could dial, a movement on camera 3 caught my eye. Just for a second, I thought I saw a tall, thin shadow pass across the lobby, moving faster than seemed possible. Then that monitor, too, turned to static. "Screw this," I muttered, slamming the phone down. I went to the door and turned the deadbolt, then wedged a chair under the handle for good measure. Whatever was out there, it wasn't getting in here. Back at the monitors, I tried switching to different cameras, adjusting settings, anything to clear the static. Nothing worked. It was like every camera in the building had broken down at the same time. Then I remembered. The system kept backups. All footage was stored for at least a week before being overwritten. I could check the previous nights, see if anything like this had happened before. I accessed the backup system and pulled up footage from 3 nights ago, Jacob's last shift. The timestamp read 2 a.m. The image showed the same lobby I'd just seen, but from a different angle. The front door was clearly visible, closed and locked. Until it wasn't. At 2:03 a.m., Jacob showed up in frame, walking quickly toward the door. He kept looking over his shoulder, like he was making sure no one was following him. He got to the door and paused, his hand on the lock. Something moved at the edge of the frame, a shadow, or maybe just a glitch in the recording. Jacob's head snapped toward it. Then, moving almost like a robot, he unlocked the door and pulled it open. The camera angle didn't show what or who was outside. Jacob stepped back, making room for someone to enter, though no one appeared on camera. His face, partially visible, looked completely terrified. The footage jumped ahead automatically to 4:50 a.m. Now Jacob was running through the hallways, looking totally freaked out. He looked directly into a camera as he passed, mouth open like he was screaming, though the footage had no sound. At 4:59 a.m., 1 minute before his shift was supposed to end, he reached a fire exit door and slammed into the push bar. Then the feed cut out, leaving nothing but static. I sat back in my chair, feeling my pulse race. Whatever had happened to Jacob, it had started just like this, with the door opening to something that shouldn't be there. I checked my watch again, 12:45 a.m. I was stuck in this office, following a set of rules I now understood were meant to keep me alive, with something in the building. Something that had already gotten one security guard and was maybe looking for another. I pulled out the list of rules again, reading them with new understanding. Stay in the supply closet from 3:33 a.m. to 3:57 a.m. Leave at exactly 5 a.m., no earlier and no later. These weren't company policies. They were survival tactics. I looked up at the static-filled monitors, knowing that somewhere beyond them, in the dark hallways of the Westfield Corporate Center, something was moving, and I had a bad feeling it was coming for me. I sat frozen in the chair, looking at the static-filled monitors, the image of Jacob running for his life stuck in my mind. The clock on the wall showed 12:45 a.m. The quiet buzz of the electronics around me seemed to get louder in the silence. That footage explained why Jacob's coffee had still been warm. He hadn't quit 3 days ago. Something had happened to him right here in this building, something that might now be coming for me. I looked again at the list of rules Tom had given me, reading each one carefully, no longer seeing them as strange company policies, but as warnings, survival instructions, each one probably learned through someone's death. I tried the cameras again, switching inputs and adjusting settings, but the static stayed on all screens. I was basically blind to whatever might be moving through the building. The security office suddenly felt more like a trap than a safe place. The temperature in the room was getting colder. I zipped up my jacket and rubbed my hands together, watching as my breath started to form small clouds in the air. The thermostat still showed 72 degrees Celsius, but it was at least 20 degrees colder than that now. I checked my watch, 12:55 a.m. That's when I heard it. Footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow, careful steps that didn't sound quite right, too heavy with an odd rhythm that no human would walk with, and something else. A wet, dragging sound with each step, like something being pulled across the floor. Rule 3 popped into my mind. If the temperature drops suddenly, turn off all lights and remain motionless. I jumped from my chair and hit the light switch, putting the room into darkness. The light from the static-filled monitors cast everything in a blue-white glow. I dropped to the floor and crawled under the desk, pulling my legs in tight and making myself as small as possible. The footsteps stopped right outside the security office door. I could hear something wet and heavy pressing against it, followed by a sound like water being squeezed from a sponge. Looking toward the bottom of the door, I saw it, a dark liquid coming under the gap, spreading across the floor. The smell hit me next, copper and rot, like old blood mixed with something I couldn't name. I put my hand over my mouth and nose, fighting the urge to gag. My entire body wanted to run, to get as far away from that door as possible, but I remembered the rule. Remain motionless. A labored breathing sound came from the other side of the door, wet and gurgling. Something scraped against the wood, not knocking, but more like claws or nails slowly dragging across the surface. The doorknob turned with a grinding sound as whatever was outside tried to get in. I watched, unable to look away, as the knob turned completely. The lock caught, holding firm. I'd never been so thankful for a deadbolt. The thing on the other side of the door made a sound then. Not quite a growl, not quite a word, but something in between that made the hair on my arms stand up. The doorknob shook violently for several seconds before going still. More scraping sounds, more of that wet, dragging noise. The dark liquid kept coming in, now covering several square feet of the floor. It moved strangely, not spreading like water would, but almost with purpose, stretching across the tiles. I sat completely still, focusing on breathing quietly through my nose. I was sweating even though I was cold. Minutes passed like hours. My muscles cramped from holding the same position, but I didn't dare move. After what felt like forever, the footsteps started again, moving away from the door and down the hallway. The wet, dragging sound faded with them. I stayed under the desk, counting slowly in my head. 100, 200, 300. When I reached 500, I finally let myself move, unfolding stiff limbs and crawling out from under the desk. The dark liquid was gone. No trace of it on the floor, not even a stain where it had been. I stood on shaky legs and reached for the light switch, hesitated, then decided against it. Better to stay in the dark for now. The monitors still showed nothing but static, but as I watched, one of them cleared, camera 12, showing the east corridor on the 3rd floor. The hallway looked empty at first, but then I noticed movement near the ceiling. A human-like shape hung from the ceiling tiles, its limbs bent at angles that shouldn't be possible for a human body. It moved like a spider, each limb stretching to an impossible length before grabbing hold and pulling its body forward. Its head twisted around completely backward as it moved, like it was looking for something behind it. As I watched, unable to look away, it reached an air vent, pulled the grate off easily, and folded its impossible body into the small opening, disappearing from view. I sank into the chair, my legs too weak to hold me. What I'd just seen couldn't exist. It went against everything I knew about human biology, about reality itself. Yet the image was stuck in my brain. Those long limbs, that backward-facing head. A loud bang snapped me out of my thoughts. Then another. Someone was pounding on the main entrance doors. Camera 3 came back to life just as I turned toward it. The static cleared, showing the front entrance. A police officer stood outside, pounding on the glass and waving frantically. He cupped his hands around his eyes, trying to see inside. My first thought was relief. Help had arrived. But then, Rule 4 came back to me. Do not open the main doors for anyone after midnight, no matter who they appear to be. The officer kept pounding. He looked real. Uniform, badge, equipment belt, all exactly as you'd expect. He shouted something, his face urgent, though I couldn't hear him through the monitors. I wasn't sure what to do. What if this was a real emergency? What if the building really was in danger? The officer pulled out a small notepad and wrote something, holding it up to the glass. Even through the grainy camera feed, I could read the message. Gas leak. Need to evacuate building immediately. My hand moved toward the phone. I should call this in, check if police were really sent here. But I remembered what happened the last time I answered the phone. Rule 1. Never answer any phone calls between 11:30 p.m. and 5 a.m. On the monitor, the officer got more upset, pounding harder on the glass. He wrote another message. Can see you on camera. Open now. Lives at risk. That made me pause. How did he know I could see him on camera? The monitor was in the security office, not visible from outside, and if there was a gas leak, why was he alone? Where were the fire department, the utility workers, the evacuation team? I remembered Jacob's footage, how he had opened the door even though he was scared, how whatever came through that door wasn't visible on camera. The officer outside kept pounding, his face getting angry. Then, mid-motion, he stopped. His entire body went still, unnaturally rigid. His head slowly tilted to one side, far beyond what a human neck should allow. His face, previously anxious and urgent, smoothed out. A smile spread across his features, too wide, stretching from ear to ear. I watched as he straightened up, that impossible smile still stuck on his face. He stared directly into the camera, directly at me, then turned and walked away. His movements were wrong, jerky and broken, like a puppet with tangled strings. Just before he walked out of view, he looked back over his shoulder. The smile got even wider, showing too many teeth. Then he was gone. leaving only the empty entrance on the monitor. I slumped back in my chair, my shirt soaked with sweat, even though it was cold. The rules had saved my life twice now. Whatever Tom had known, whatever Jacob had learned too late, it was real. The things in this building, whatever they were, could take forms that looked human. They could copy, but not perfectly. I stared at the static-filled monitors, wondering what other forms they might take before the night was over. The clock read 1:45 a.m. More than 3 hours until I could leave. 3 hours during which I needed to stay alive in a building that was hunting me. I pulled out the rules again, reading Rule 5 with new understanding. Stay in the supply closet from 3:33 a.m. to 3:57 a.m. every night. Something specific happened during those 24 minutes. Something I didn't want to be around for. The static on the monitors seemed to pulse slightly, like the building had a heartbeat. I wondered how many others had sat in this chair watching these screens, realizing too late what kind of place they were trapped in. And I wondered if I'd make it to 5 a.m. to find out. The static on the monitors kept beating like a pulse. I sat in the dark office, trying to understand what I just saw. The fake cop, the spider thing in the hall, the cold liquid coming under the door. None of it made any sense. I pulled out the rules again and read them over and over. The fifth one caught my eye. Stay in the supply closet from 3:33 a.m. to 3:57 a.m. Why those exact times? What was happening during those 24 minutes that was so dangerous I had to hide? The monitors blinked, some showing clear pictures for a second before going back to static. I saw bits of empty hallways, dark offices, and the main lobby with its front doors shut tight. Nothing seemed to be moving through the building. I needed to know more. Jacob definitely knew something. His notes showed he was figuring stuff out before whatever happened to him. But the official logbook just had basic stuff. If he found anything important, he probably hid it somewhere. I looked at the security desk. It was old, made of wood with lots of drawers. I started searching through each drawer one by one. Most just had normal office stuff, building plans, tenant info. Nothing helpful. The bottom drawer was locked. I tried all my keys until one worked. Inside, I found a stack of old newspapers. More stories about weird stuff in the building. Deaths, people going missing, strange accidents. They all happened every few years. I put them aside to check later. That's when I noticed something weird about the desk. The bottom drawer wasn't as deep as it should be. I emptied it and felt along the back. It was looser than normal. I pushed different spots until I heard a click, and a small part of the panel popped out. Behind it was a hidden compartment. I reached in and pulled out an old, stained leather journal. I put it on the desk and opened it. The first entry was from June 1975. The writing was neat and clear. First night on shift. Building seems normal. Mr. Harris mentioned some special rules to follow. Seems odd, but the pay is good. The next few entries described routine nights. But then, something's wrong with the elevator. It took me to the basement when I pressed 5. Doors opened to darkness. Heard breathing. Pressed door close immediately. Talked to day guard Tom. He says to avoid the elevator between 2-3 a.m. I flipped forward. Different handwriting now, shaky and hurried. March 1982. Saw it again tonight. Standing at the end of the hall on 14. Tall, wearing that same black coat. Don't look directly at it. It knows when you see it. More entries followed, each from a different guard based on the handwriting. Each one documented different encounters, different rules learned often through terrifying experiences. Some described things that could look human but moved in strange ways. Others mentioned symbols showing up on walls, temperature drops, weird sounds coming from inside the walls. I got to the more recent entries. Jacob's handwriting. September 12th. Something tried to call me tonight. Answered before remembering Tom's warning. Heard words that made my head hurt. Hung up. Won't make that mistake again. September 15th. Saw a man standing outside. Not a man. Something else. It smiled too wide. Its teeth. Jesus, its teeth. September 17th. It's getting colder each night. Found symbols drawn in the bathroom mirror. Wiped them away, but they came back. September 20th. They know I've seen too much. I closed the journal and put it down. My hands were shaking. This was worse than I thought. This building had been, whatever the right word might be, haunted or infected for decades. Guards had been dealing with these things for years, passing down what they knew through hidden notes and warnings. The clock showed 2:30 a.m. I'd been reading for almost an hour. I went back to the official logbook and wrote, "Building secure, all quiet." A lie, but what else could I write? Building full of impossible creatures. For the next 45 minutes, I kept reading the old newspaper clippings to learn more about the building's history. It was built in 1923. First deaths were in 1925, 4 workers found in the basement with unusual wounds. The building changed owners every few decades, always after weird incidents. At 3:15 a.m., it got freezing cold. It happened so fast I took a sharp breath, seeing it in the air right away. Within seconds, frost started to form on the windows, making delicate designs right in front of me. The cold was intense and went deep. It was unlike anything I'd ever felt. The lights started to blink, not randomly, but in a pattern. On, off, then 2 quick flashes, then 3. This pattern showed up all over the building from what I could see on the few working monitors. It looked like some kind of code or signal. I looked at my watch, 3:22 a.m. I needed to get to the supply closet. Rule 5 seemed really important now. I grabbed my flashlight and the journal, unlocked the office door, and looked into the hallway. It was empty. The blinking lights made moving shadows that seemed to move on their own. It was even colder outside the office, cold enough to make my eyes water, and my lungs hurt when I breathed. I moved fast but quietly down the hall. The supply closet was at the end, past the break room. As I walked, the lights kept flashing in that pattern, making it hard to see. The shadows got bigger and smaller with each flash. The walls looked different. When the lights came on, I could see dark stains spreading across them, like wet paint. They made partial designs, weird symbols I couldn't really understand. A sound made me stop. A low, shaking noise that seemed to come from inside the walls. It got higher until it almost hurt my ears. Then it suddenly stopped, leaving total silence. I started moving again, faster now. The supply closet was just ahead. I could see the door, a plain metal one with "storage" printed on it. I reached it at 3:31 a.m. according to my watch. I struggled with the keys, found the right one, and unlocked it. Inside was a small room with shelves of cleaning supplies, tools, light bulbs, and other stuff. I closed the door behind me, locked it, and leaned against it, breathing hard. I shined my flashlight around the small space. That's when I saw them. A flashlight, just like mine, and an ID badge sitting on a middle shelf, partly hidden behind some boxes. I picked up the badge. Jacob's photo looked back at me, his face serious but normal, very different from the scared face I'd seen in the security footage. He had been here, hiding just like me, following the same rule. But it didn't save him. I checked my watch. 3:33 a.m. exactly. Whatever happened during these 24 minutes, I was about to find out. At first, nothing changed. The closet was cold but quiet. I sat on the floor, back against the door, flashlight pointed at the ceiling to make some light. I looked through the journal again for anything about this specific time. There was one entry, written in shaky handwriting. "Don't listen to the voices. Not real. Cover your ears if you have to. Don't open the door no matter what." As if on cue, the whispering started. It was quiet at first, like a radio playing several rooms away. Voices too soft to understand. But they got louder, more pushy. They came from all over, the walls, the ceiling, even from the cleaning bottles on the shelves. The words got clearer, but I didn't know the language. Hearing them gave me goosebumps and a headache. With the whispers came other sounds, wet, nasty noises like meat tearing or bones breaking. Then I heard footsteps, lots of them coming from everywhere, heavy and slow. They stopped right outside the supply closet. I stopped breathing and pushed my back hard against the door. Something scratched at the door, soft at first, then harder. Tap, tap, tap. Scratch, scratch, scratch. A rhythm that made my teeth hurt. The whispers got louder until they turned into screams, high-pitched cries that didn't sound human. They matched the same pattern as the flashing lights earlier. The door handle shook hard, metal scraping against metal as something tried to get in. The whole door rattled. I pushed back against it, though I knew that if these things really wanted to get in, a locked door wouldn't stop them. "Michael, are you in there?" The voice sounded like Tom's, same tone, same slight accent. "Michael, please, I need your help. There's been an accident." But something was off about the voice. It sounded right in a technical way, but didn't feel real, like someone had programmed a computer to talk. "Just open the door, just for a second. Please, I'm hurt." The begging kept going and sounded more desperate. Then the voice switched to Jacob's. "Let me in, man. They're after me. Please." Then a child's voice, then an old woman's, then several speaking together in perfect unison. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the voices got through anyway. I started humming to myself, trying to block them out. I kept my eyes on my watch, counting the minutes. 3:40, 3:45, 3:50. The attack on the door got worse. Something heavy kept slamming against it. The hinges creaked. A dark liquid started coming under the door, just like before in the office. It moved like it knew where it was going, starting to make symbols on the floor. I pulled my feet up, hugging my knees to my chest. The liquid kept spreading, now climbing up the walls even though it shouldn't be able to, making more patterns. The small space filled with a copper smell, metallic and thick. 3:55. 2 more minutes. The door bent inward as something pushed against it with crazy force. The metal bent but didn't break. The voices had turned into a mix of noise, screaming and begging and laughing all at once. 3:56. Everything stopped. The liquid froze in place. The voices cut off mid-scream. The pressure against the door vanished. The silence came so fast and totally that my ears rang. 3:57. I waited another minute just to be safe. Nothing happened. The time had passed. I lowered my hands from my ears and got up. The liquid that had been making symbols was gone without a trace on the floor or walls. I unlocked the door with shaky hands and opened it a little, peeking out. The hallway was empty. The lights were on, steady now, no more flickering. But the walls were covered in symbols made with a dark, reddish-brown stuff. Weird patterns of curves and angles that hurt my eyes when I looked right at them. They were everywhere, floor to ceiling. The smell hit me right away, copper, like blood, but with something else under it, something very old and wrong. I stepped into the hallway, making sure not to touch any of the symbols. They seemed to move a little when I saw them from the corner of my eye, but stayed still when I looked directly at them. Something shined on the floor near my feet. I bent down to check it out. A security badge, old and yellow. The photo showed a young man with a mustache and 70s-style hair. The name said Alan Pritchard, and the date at the bottom was 1982. It was 40 years old, but it looked like someone dropped it just minutes ago. I put the badge in my pocket and looked around. The building felt different now, quieter. Whatever happened during those 24 minutes had changed something. The symbols on the walls gave off a faint glow, almost like they were somehow alive in a way I couldn't get. I checked my watch, 4 a.m. 1 more hour until I could leave. 1 more hour in a building that wasn't just haunted. It was something else completely. Something much older and more dangerous than regular ghost stories. I needed to get back to the security office and figure out what to do next. The journal had given me some answers, but created even more questions. Most importantly, what happened to Jacob? And was I heading for the same thing? I walked carefully through the hallway, trying to avoid the strange symbols that covered everything. The old security badge I found, Alan Pritchard, 1982, felt heavy in my pocket. It reminded me I wasn't the first person to walk these halls and deal with whatever was in this building. Getting back to the security office took longer than it should have. I kept my eyes mostly on the floor, trying not to look directly at the symbols. Something about their shapes made my head hurt and my vision get blurry whenever I looked at them too long. The hallway seemed really long under the fluorescent lights that were now working overhead. When I finally got to the security office, I locked the door behind me and checked the time. 4:05 a.m. Less than an hour until I could leave this place. The thought of freedom, of fresh air, and getting away from the scary things in these walls made my hands shake. The monitors had cleared up while I was gone. No more static, just clear views of empty hallways, stairwells, and entrances. The symbols that covered the walls in person weren't showing up on the camera feeds at all, making the building look normal and boring. That difference bothered me more than anything else I'd seen tonight. I sat down at the desk and rewound the footage to 3:33 a.m. I wanted to see what the cameras caught during those 24 minutes I spent hiding in the supply closet. Even with all the scratching at the door, the voices, and the banging on the metal door, the video showed nothing. Empty hallways, empty stairwells, a quiet, still building. The time code went forward, 3:35, 3:40, 3:45. Nothing. No movement anywhere, not even shadows or changes in light. At 3:57, the footage showed me coming out of the supply closet, looking scared, staring at walls that looked blank on camera but which I knew were covered in those creepy symbols. I leaned back in the chair, feeling weird about this new discovery. Whatever was here could mess with reality, or at least how reality was seen. It could hide from cameras while scaring people. It could make symbols that human eyes could see but digital recordings couldn't. I looked over at the parking garage cameras. Most spaces were empty this late, but I spotted a familiar sedan. Tom's car was still there, parked in the same spot I'd seen it when I arrived for my shift. That seemed odd. Tom had almost run out of the building when handing over to me. Why would his car still be here hours later? A scary thought hit me. What if Tom never actually left the building? What if he'd just gone somewhere else inside? I checked my watch again. 4:22 a.m. I had less than 40 minutes until I could leave. The smart thing would be to stay put, wait it out, and run at exactly 5 a.m. That's what the rules said. That's what kept people alive in this place. But Tom's car worried me. The day guard had been weird and nervous, but he'd also warned me and given me the rules that had kept me alive so far. If he was still here, maybe he needed help. Maybe he knew more about what was happening. I got up and grabbed my stuff, putting Jacob's journal into my pocket along with Alan Pritchard's old badge. I picked up my flashlight even though the building lights were working again. On a desk notepad, I wrote down the time I planned to leave the office and where I was going, just in case someone found it later and needed to know. I unlocked the door and went back into the hallway. The symbols still covered everything, glowing faintly with a reddish light. I made my way to the elevator, pressed the call button, and waited. When the doors opened, I paused, remembering one of the journal entries about the elevator taking someone to the basement instead of their chosen floor. But I needed to get to the second floor quickly, and the stairs seemed like a bad option with those symbols everywhere. I stepped inside and pressed 2. The elevator moved smoothly up and stopped right where it should. When the doors opened, I half expected to see something nightmarish. But it was just another hallway, looking the same as the one I'd left, with the same symbols covering the walls, floor, and ceiling. Tom's office was at the end of the hall. As I got closer, I noticed light coming from under the door, a thin yellow line across the darkness. I slowed down, suddenly unsure. Maybe this was a trap. Maybe whatever wanted me dead was trying to lure me in by promising answers. I got to the door and stood there listening. No sound came from inside, no movement, no breathing, nothing. just quiet. I knocked lightly, not really expecting an answer, but feeling like I should let someone know I was there. When nobody answered, I tried the handle. The door opened easily, showing Tom's office, a bigger, nicer version of the security station downstairs. There was a proper desk, filing cabinets, a coffee maker, and a small TV on the wall. And behind the desk, sitting in his chair, was Tom. He sat completely still, staring straight ahead. His eyes were open but didn't follow me as I entered the room. His face had that same waxy, pale look I'd noticed when I first met him, but now I understood it wasn't just stress or poor health. It was death. I moved closer, part of me already knowing what I would find but needing to check anyway. As I came around the desk, I saw the full horror of what had happened to Tom. His shirt was torn open, showing a big hole in his chest where his heart should have been. The wound wasn't jagged or bloody. It was clean, almost surgical, like something had reached inside carefully and just taken what it wanted. I backed up, bumping into the filing cabinet behind me. Tom was dead, probably had been dead for hours. Maybe since shortly after he'd given me those rules and tried to leave the building. Or thought he had left. On the desk in front of Tom's body was an open folder, pages neatly arranged like they were left for me to find. I forced myself to look away from the horrible wound and focus on the documents. The folder had employment records, dozens of them, going back 50 years. Night security guards who had worked at the Westfield Corporate Center. I flipped through them quickly, looking at the hire dates and end dates. A pattern showed up right away. Each guard had worked exactly 3 nights before their job ended. The reason fields were different: quit without notice, no show, family emergency. But the timing was always the same. 3 nights. Then I found Jacob's file. Hired 3 weeks ago, fired after 3 shifts. Reason: no show, presumed quit. A handwritten note was paperclipped to the inside of the folder. The handwriting matched the hurried scrawl on the rules Tom had given me. If you're reading this, I didn't make it. I'm sorry. I tried to warn you more directly than my predecessor warned me. The building was constructed on top of something ancient, something that feeds on fear before it consumes its victims. I don't know what it is exactly, but it's been here longer than the building, longer than the city maybe. The ownership changes regularly. Those who learn the truth either run away or become victims themselves. Some try to contain it by following the rules, setting up patterns that keep it not satisfied, but manageable. I thought I could break the cycle. I was wrong. I stayed too long, saw too much. By my 3rd week, it knew me too well, knew when I was most afraid, when I would make mistakes. It only needs 3 nights to learn you, to know what scares you most. This is your first night. You can still escape if you follow the rules. Get out at 5 a.m. exactly. Don't come back. Don't let them convince you to come back. They'll try. New management, higher pay, whatever it takes. Run. Run as far from this place as you can. The note ended there. I read it twice, trying to understand what Tom had told me. The building itself, or something underneath it, was the thing causing all this. The shapes I'd seen, the voices I'd heard, even that police officer with the creepy wide smile. They were all parts of the same thing. It was studying me, just like it had studied Jacob and Tom and everyone before. I checked my watch. 4:43 a.m. 17 minutes until I could leave. I took pictures of the employment records with my phone, but I wasn't sure how they'd help. Who would believe me? Who would buy that some incredibly old, weird thing was living under an office building in downtown Chicago, eating people's fear and taking their hearts? When I turned to leave, I noticed something on Tom's computer screen. It was an email from earlier that evening, right before my shift started. The subject line read, "New night security guard." I moved closer to read it. Tom. We've selected another candidate to replace Jacob. Name's Michael Wilson. Background in private security, former military. Should work out better than the last one. He starts tonight. Remember, standard procedure. 3 nights is all we need. Management. I felt sick to my stomach. 3 nights. That's all they needed. I was being set up, just like Jacob had been, just like Tom before him, and Alan Pritchard, and who knew how many others over the years. But Tom had tried to break the pattern. He'd warned me straight up on my first night, giving me info that had taken him weeks to figure out. He'd tried to save me, and it cost him his life. I backed away from the desk, from Tom's lifeless stare and the hole in his chest. I needed to get out of this building at exactly 5 a.m., and I needed to never, ever come back. I headed back to the elevator, pressed the call button, and waited. The symbols on the walls seemed to move faster now, like they were excited or something. The elevator came and I stepped inside, hitting the button for the main floor. As the doors closed, I saw something moving at the end of the hallway. A tall person in a long black coat, with their face hidden in shadow. The same figure I'd seen on the security cameras earlier in the night. They just stood there, watching me as the elevator doors shut. The ride down was quiet. When the doors opened again, I half ran to the security office, needing to grab my stuff before getting out. The symbols on the walls looked brighter now, almost glowing. Their weird patterns seeming to move when I didn't look directly at them. Inside the office, I grabbed my bag and jacket. I made one final entry in the logbook. Building secure, ending shift at 5 a.m. A total lie, but what else could I write? No one would believe the truth anyway. The clock on the wall read 4:56 a.m. 4 minutes. I stood by the main entrance, keys in hand, ready to unlock the doors the moment my watch showed 5. Not a second earlier, not a second later. That was the rule. And the rules had kept me alive so far. Those last 4 minutes felt like forever. I could tell the building was somehow aware of me, watching what I was doing. The symbols on the walls seemed to beat in rhythm with my heart, like we were connected somehow. My watch beeped softly. 5 a.m. I unlocked the main doors, pushed them open, and stepped out into the cool morning air. The cold morning air felt good on my face after how stuffy it was inside, but the building wasn't ready to let me go. As I walked forward, the overhead lights started breaking behind me, one after another, glass shattering and falling down with sparks. The noise followed me like gunshots. The lobby lights, the wall lights, the emergency lights, all blowing up one after another. I started running, my shadow jumping all over the parking lot with each new burst of light. 20 feet from the entrance now. 15. The concrete under my feet seemed to move and wobble, trying to make me fall. A loud crack sounded from behind. I looked back to see the front doors closing by themselves, huge glass panels moving super fast. Without slowing down, I threw myself forward in a desperate jump. My shoulder hit the small gap between the doors as they slammed against me. Pain went through my arm, but I made it through to the other side, just as the doors closed with a final click. I stumbled forward, almost falling but catching myself just in time. My right shoulder hurt where the doors had caught me, but nothing seemed broken. I kept walking toward my car, pulling the keys from my pocket with shaky fingers. The sky was getting lighter in the east. The sun was coming up over Chicago, making the clouds pink and orange. My watch said 5:02 a.m. I had made it out during the safe time. As I got to my car, something made me turn back for one last look at the Westfield Corporate Center. What I saw scared me to death. Every window of the 20-story building had someone in it. Dozens of them, hundreds, all completely still, all watching me. Some looked like office workers in business clothes. Others wore maintenance uniforms or security guard outfits from different times. A woman in 1970s-style clothing. A man with a handlebar mustache who might have been Alan Pritchard. And on the second floor, standing in what I knew was Tom's office, was the man in the black coat. Even from this far away, I could feel him staring at me, like a weight pressing against my skin. None of them moved. None of them waved or did anything. They just watched as I unlocked my car with shaky hands, got inside, and started the engine. They were still watching, lined up in perfect rows across the building's front, as I drove out of the parking lot and left. 3 days later, I sat across from Detective Sarah Martinez at the Chicago Police Department. The small interview room felt stuffy and tight. Its blank walls reminded me of the symbol-covered hallways I'd run from. When I told them about finding Tom's body, they didn't believe me at first, which I expected. Who would believe a story about ancient things living in the walls of a downtown office building? "Let me get this straight, Mr. Wilson," Martinez said, tapping her pen against her notepad. "You're claiming that something supernatural killed Thomas Rodriguez by removing his heart." "I know how it sounds," I said, "but I saw his body. The wound was too clean to be made by any normal weapon, and there were other things happening in that building, things I can't explain." I'd given Martinez an edited version of events. I mentioned finding Tom's body, discovering the employment records, and noticing patterns of disappearances. I left out the symbols on the walls, the voices in the supply closet, and the thing pretending to be a police officer. Even with my censored account, I could see the doubt in her eyes. Until yesterday. "We found something during our investigation of the building," Martinez said, opening a folder on the table between us. Construction crews were checking the foundation for structural damage after reports of unusual settling. They found a sealed room that wasn't on any blueprint. She slid a photograph across the table. I picked it up, already dreading what I might see. 12 bodies, she continued. All male, ages ranging from mid-20s to late 40s. All with the same wound pattern as Rodriguez. A precision removal of the heart. Based on varying stages of decomposition, the deaths occurred over several decades. I stared at the photograph. The sealed room looked very old, with walls of rough stone rather than modern concrete. The bodies had been arranged in a circle, their arms and legs positioned to form a symbol similar to the ones I'd noticed covering the walls. "We've identified 9 of them so far," Martinez said. "All former security guards at Westfield Corporate Center, including Jacob, the man you replaced." She watched my reaction carefully. I wasn't surprised, and she could tell. "This is why I called you back in, Mr. Wilson. Your statement included details you couldn't have known. You mentioned employment records showing a pattern of guards working exactly 3 nights. Our investigation confirms this pattern going back decades." Martinez pulled out more documents, newspaper articles yellowed with age, dating back to the building's construction. "The Westfield Corporate Center has a history most people don't know about," she said. "Look at these." She spread the articles across the table. The oldest was from 1925, just 2 years after the building was built. The headline read, "4 workers found dead in new office building." Another from 1954, "Mysterious disappearances plague downtown office complex." Then 1983, "String of deaths leads to closure of Westfield Center. New ownership promises renovations and reopening." Looking at each article showed a pattern. About every 30 years, deaths and disappearances would go up, then the building would change owners and close for a while for renovations. "The current owner, Richard Harris, has vanished without a trace," Martinez said. "His office claims he's on an extended business trip abroad, but no one has any record of his travel. His passport hasn't been used, his credit cards are untouched." I looked up from the articles. "You believe me now?" It wasn't a question, but Martinez nodded anyway. "I believe something is happening in that building that doesn't make normal sense. I don't know if I'm ready to accept your more supernatural interpretations, but the facts are too strange to ignore." She gathered the articles, putting them back in her folder. "We've closed the building while we investigate. No one's allowed in or out without police escort. That won't stop it," I said quietly. "Stop what, exactly?" I hesitated. How could I explain what I'd experienced, what I now knew? That the building itself was alive somehow. or possessed by something very old that fed on fear before consuming its victims. Whatever killed those people, I finally said. Whatever killed Tom. It's not something you can contain with police tape and locked doors. Martinez looked at me for a long moment. You're really scared, aren't you? Yes, I admitted. And you should be too. Our meeting ended right after that. Martinez said she'd keep me in the loop about the investigation and asked me to stay available for more questions. While I was packing up my stuff to head out, she asked me one last thing. The rules you mentioned in your statement, never answer calls between certain hours, stay in a closet at specific times, leave exactly at 5 a.m., where did these come from? Tom gave them to me, I said. They were passed down from guard to guard. Rules for survival. And you followed them. That's why I'm alive. As I left the police station, my phone rang. The number looked kind of familiar, but I couldn't place it right away. I picked up hesitantly. Michael Wilson speaking. Mr. Wilson, this is Andrea from Westfield Management Company. Her voice was pleasant and professional. I'm calling regarding your recent employment with us. We understand there was an incident during your shift. I stopped walking and froze on the sidewalk as people walked past me. We'd like to offer you a special assignment, she continued. Just one more night at the building to retrieve some security footage for the police investigation. We're offering triple your normal pay rate, given the unusual circumstances. My mouth went dry. The building is closed for investigation. We have special permission, Andrea assured me smoothly. Just one night, Mr. Wilson. We need someone familiar with the security systems, and you're the only qualified person available. Just one more night. Triple pay. The words from Tom's note kept playing in my mind. They'll try. New management, higher pay, whatever it takes. Run. I'm not interested, I said firmly. I'm no longer employed with Westfield, and I have no intention of returning to that building. Mr. Wilson, I don't think you understand the opportunity. I hung up, my phone still trembling in my hand. They were already trying to get me back, just like Tom had warned. That evening, I got back to my apartment completely wiped out. The past 3 days were nothing but police interviews, no sleep, and jumping at every little sound. I started seeing symbols everywhere I looked, in tile floors, brick walls, even how my books sat on my shelves. At night, I dreamed of dark hallways and voices whispering things I couldn't quite hear. I unlocked my door and stepped inside, knowing right away something was off. Nothing looked out of place, but the air seemed different, cooler, with a strange feeling that made the hair on my arms stand up. On the floor just inside the door was a white envelope that hadn't been there when I left this morning. My name was written on it in neat block letters. No stamp, no return address. Someone had slipped it under my door while I was out. I picked it up and tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper containing the 6 rules I'd come to know by heart, followed by a message. They know you survived. They'll find you eventually. I felt cold all over. I checked my locks, pulled the blinds, and sat in the dark living room trying to quiet my wild thoughts. The note meant I wasn't safe. Getting away from the building wouldn't help. Whatever was in the Westfield Corporate Center had somehow found me. I didn't think twice. I grabbed a duffel bag from my closet and started packing. Clothes, toiletries, my passport, and enough cash to get far away from Chicago. I took Jacob's journal and the old badge I'd found, shoving them deep in the bag to prove what had happened to me. The thing in that building was trapped for now, stuck behind police tape and locked doors. But I wondered how long that would last. The articles Martinez had shown me showed a pattern going back almost 100 years. It changed, got new owners, updated the building, and kept on killing. Within an hour, I had loaded my stuff into my car. I looked at my apartment one last time, knowing I'd never come back. Then I drove, heading south out of the city without knowing where I was going, just away from Chicago. Looking in my mirror, I watched the city lights get smaller in the distance. Somewhere back in all those lit-up buildings stood the Westfield Corporate Center, its windows dark, waiting. I drove all night, watching until I couldn't see the building anymore.